Chainsaw Man chapter 136 is not what we were certainly expecting going into it, but in a way it's par for the course of what you come to expect to a certain degree from a Chainsaw Man chapter. We got horny Dnji and we got angry Dnji all in the same chapter, but hidden beneath those two extremes is the fallout from the last manga chapter where Dnji is shown grappling even further with his decision to stop being Chainsaw Man, but the way that it's presented to us is quietly setting the seeds for what could be the match of the century. Asa Mitaka slash Yoru versus Dnji slash Pochita. So with my initial thoughts out of the way, let's back things up a little bit and let's dive into the recap portion of the review before we further unpack what's going to be a very interesting case study for Dnji. So the chapter opens up with the ever so depressed Dnji walking into a school with his shoulder slumped forward, and we see that the depression is certainly real, which given the title for the chapters is called A Normal Life. I love what we're seeing with Dnji finally getting the thing that he told Pochita that he wanted, but it's not exactly what he thought it would be. However, Dnji doesn't get too long to feel down in the dumps because we see the first of the fallout from Mitaka being said to be the one who deserves credit for everything Chainsaw Man said that he's done, when one of the students comes up to Dnji and calls him out for wearing Chainsaw Man merchandise, which you gotta give it to Dnji. If anything, that man totally buys into what 50 Cent said about the G-Unit merchandise, which is that you gotta wear it at all times when it's your own brand. Dnji's wearing his own merchandise. Much respect to that. However, one of those students, after calling him out, ends up resulting in a brawl because they picked a fight with Dnji and hitting him in the face, and we jump over to Dnji getting scolded by the teacher, and we learn that Dnji actually ended up putting the kid who attacked him in the hospital, which that makes sense when you consider that in part 1 of Chainsaw Man, Dnji was constrained by Kishibe, so anyone who's picking the hand-to-hand combat with Dnji is really lucky that he didn't accidentally kill him, because it's well within his actual abilities to do so even when he's suppressed, just given how much stronger Dnji is than a normal human. This leads to Yoshida just popping up and suggesting that they just skip school outright altogether and hang out like ordinary high school students, which leads to them sitting in an empty theater where they're waiting for the devil hunters to come and remove the body of a dead devil, sitting in front of the screen with Dnji not even being fazed by the sight of a dead body. He's more so annoyed that Yoshida is that one guy who's always talking in a movie theater. Yoshida, however, takes that time to basically confirm to us something that we've at least considered a possibility, which is that Yoshida is actually in cahoots with Fami, because he's making a point to tell Dnji that the world is doing just fine without Chainsaw Man, but there's no need for him to be Chainsaw Man ever again, and he goes as far as make a super meta joke saying that you're not the protagonist anymore, which is basically a meta reference because we know that Chainsaw Man Part 2, Dnji isn't the main character because according to the physical manga volumes of Chainsaw Man, it's actually Mitaka right now. This leads to Yoshida appealing to Denji's horny side, saying that he's got a date for him and to knock her socks off, and Dnji just sits there alone in the theater and becomes a total vibe killer. He straight up tells this girl that he's super depressed and he's not going to be really fun to be around. You'd think that between this and the corpse of a dead devil that this girl would have been turned off, but nope, she just grabs Dnji by the crotch, and even Dnji is shocked by it, and she makes this wicked grin to Dnji like she's about to hit him with that got double vacuum twister 3000, and Dnji is totally unprepared for what's coming. So either Dnji has a total freak on his hands or Yoshida is secretly a pimp who's running a ring of females. So the reason why this chapter does work is that it's a great contrast to what we've been given in the last few chapters, where we see the complexity of Dnji struggling with the loss of his identity and the anger that was hinted at, given people were saying that Chainsaw Man was taking credit for Mitaka's work, and you had fake Chainsaw Man spitting in the face of all the sacrifices from people like Aki and Power who died in part 1 to make Dnji into who he is today, and we see it come to a head where the depression is the theme for the bulk of this chapter, all against the backdrop of us knowing that Fami and the War Devil are coming after Pochita while simultaneously trying to weaken Dnji by removing Chainsaw Man from people's thoughts, which we know is something that is effective because Yoru talks about the fact that people have forgotten about war, and as a result she's a lot weaker than she should have been. This is even more effective when we consider that the stuff we're seeing in Chainsaw Man is splitting the world even down to the school level, where people are split between Chainsaw Man and anti-Chainsaw Man factions, just like we saw with the protesters and Dnji taking out that frustration, albeit in self-defense as an example of Denji's internal struggle manifesting and clashing with the external conflict of the story itself. It's going to be very interesting to see how Fujimoto pushes this before we get into Dnji interacting with Mitaka after Mitaka's come out to the world. And I think a great example of this will be what happens here with this girl that's in the movie theater with him, about to give him that sloppy toppy while they are inside the movie theater to themselves. If someone who's as eternally horny as Dnji is unable to finish the job, then you know that he's down in the mud with his depression. I think this is a great situation to continue building on Dnji getting to live a normal life while also having him realize that normal for him isn't necessarily normal for others. When you're out here throwing down with the Bat Devil and you got Himeno vomiting in your mouth, you got Reze trying to ridge you up before she turns into the crazy bomber girl, and you got Makima being as crazy as Makima was, normal is a hard thing to go back to. I think what we're seeing here is the slow maturation of Dnji coming to grips with the two sides of himself, Dnji the human and Dnji the chainsaw man, and them being one and the same person moving forward. That's actually what makes Dnji open up his heart to this random girl and asking Yoshida if this is what it means to be a normal human. That's what makes this scene so sad, because you know Dnji is hurting right now. We've seen Dnji over 100 chapters now, so we know the character, and based off of Denji's record with women, this girl's about to hit him with that gok, and she's probably about to use him as well. She isn't interested in Dnji as a person. Outside of she's thinking of having sex with Dnji, and while she could just be a freak, there could be something else here. And I will admit I'm a little biased because I do have PTSD from the whole Reze situation. So I do think it's possible that she has something else going for her. She's got some issues, and we've seen with Chainsaw Man Part 2 that the story does repeat some of the stuff you saw from Part 1. The idea of her being the Reze to Dnji right now would line up if we think about it. Yoshida has intel on Dnji and he's clearly using it to control the options to get the outcome that he wants. Overall, this is a very simple chapter of Chainsaw Man on a surface level that you could just boil it down to bullet points saying that Dnji is depressed. Dnji's depression manifests as anger and he attacks a fanboy. Yoshida is sus as always. Dnji ends the chapter about to get his little Chainsaw Man tugged until he gets a happy ending. However, it's the smaller stuff that's sprinkled beneath the surface that you can draw out from the past stuff that we've seen that makes you look at this whole thing and see somewhat of where Fujimoto might be taking this in terms of playing with the themes of internal and external conflict working together. And that's actually my chapter question for you guys. What do you guys think about Denji's state of mind right now? Where do you think this is going next? While you think that over, click here to watch these other Chainsaw Man videos you see on the screen right now.